name's Amber Collie. I have 4 children. I have Zach, Levi, Caden, and a princess named Layla. I have an awesome family. You know, I remember telling my friends, oh my gosh, I have 4 kids at 4 schools and this is crazy. And little did I know, now that seems like nothing. Okay, it was Memorial Day, 2010. We had wanted to go to a pool and barbecue at our neighbor's house, and we told Zach, and he really wanted to go to the beach with his friends, and I felt like I gave in, like, yeah, okay, all right, fine, you know, you go. So I remember going to this pool party, and the little ones were swimming, and the barbecue was just being started, and a boy that lives there is my son Levi's age, and he came up to me and said, is Levi coming? So I went up and got my phone. I remember I noticed a voicemail message, and
we were there almost all day. We've been in the water. Decided to go back out one more time. I remembered it being cold, so I decided I was just gonna run in, dive into the water, get used to it really quick. I ran to dive under a wave, hit a sandbar. I'm gonna die at 15 years old. I can't believe this happened to me. I remember being dragged. He let go of my arms. It was like they weren't even attached to my body.
The mom that drove them down there, it was her. She simply said, there's been an accident. Zach's at Hoag Hospital. You need to get down here right away. I knew it was bad. I sensed immediately this is serious. But I had no idea that it was that serious. I'm trying to dial his friend, and he says, Amber, Zach's not moving. Zach's not moving. You see in the movies, Mr. and Mrs. Collie have a seat, and he said, I won't sugarcoat it. He said, it's really bad. They had done some x-rays and an MRI, and they're waiting on the results. He had, the big neck brace on, so he could hardly look over at me, but he just smiled. And for me, that moment was, he's alive. Like, he's alive. Like, I felt like it didn't matter. Like, at that moment for me, as his mom, I just felt like it doesn't matter. Like, whatever it is, he's alive. It's like, we're gonna deal with this. If Zach can live in a body that all of a sudden doesn't work, is being as active as he used to be, like knowing who he is, if he can do it with a smile on his face, then I can do it. I can sit there and walk beside him.
I have never broken a bone in my body until I broke my neck. I grew up riding dirt bikes, surfing. I was just always outdoors. I'm always hanging out with my friends.
He is paralyzed. He lost the function of his body, and from day one chose to move forward, and I think we kind of followed suit. It did happen. It did happen to our family, and there's nothing that can change that. But that doesn't mean he can't have a good life. It doesn't mean everything stops and we just feel sorry for ourselves and curl up in a ball and hide.
Zach can face life with those challenges and not complain. It causes me not to complain as much either.
This injury could happen to anybody. Therapy and rehab was just what we did.
When I first got hurt, I couldn't even push my wheelchair on my own. And so that was a big struggle for me because I had no freedom. I couldn't go anywhere on my own. Just like simple things you take for granted.
His legs, they shake to the point where we actually strap him down. We tie him down at night. So he is 7 to 10 hours, depending on how long he sleeps, in the same position. If he just wants to sit on the couch, what it takes to get him from his now wheelchair to the couch to the bed.
If I want something, a glass of water, to brush my teeth, I always have to wait for someone to do it for me. And sometimes that's really frustrating. One of the biggest things that I've had to learn is patience. Would give anything to have my independence back, but now going to school, getting my life on the right track to get out in the world and eventually be independent on my own one day is what drives me. I'm gonna get there one day, it's just gonna take a little longer. I like to tell people I'm still the same person I was before my accident. I wanna have a family one day and live on my own, have a house. I love to go to concerts, go to the beach, I'm still me.
I get amazed and blessed to watch Zach's coping with life because it gives me inspiration.
We work a lot on upper body, in hopes of one day that I'll be able to transfer myself, like into my chair, into a seat. That's a big goal we have.
It's very important. His body gets moved, gets worked out, doesn't atrophy. There's definitely something about giving back. Just seems like the most natural thing to do.
I've grown a lot more compassionate for others too. It's made me definitely want to help more people. Don't take life for granted. Be appreciative for what you have. Never give up. Persevere.
Good morning. I'm Adrian, and this is my son, Zach.
Hello.
Thanks for having us here today. It's kind of funny, Zach suggested that I play that video last night, and the title of my outline is Perseverance. And so when I saw his tattoo on the go up there, it's kind of funny how those things happen for a reason. And anyways, I've been married for 33 years. I got married in 1992. I have 4 kids. I originally came to the Vineyard because when I got saved, the guy that led me to the Lord was a Calvary Chapel guy. And at that time, I was listening to K-Wave, and there was a guy on there named Hank Hanegraaff, and he used to tell stories about the Vineyard that weren't good. And I knew my mom and dad were going there, and I decided I need to go to this place and like maybe rescue them. And that's originally why I came here. And the first home group that I was involved in was the Kleinpeters. I don't know if any of you guys know Denise and John Kleinpeter, but that period of my life was pretty amazing. Just hanging out with them every week and learning from them. And where I was at in my life when Zach's injury happened 15 years ago, 2010 Memorial Day, I was kind of like at the place in my life, I think I was like 38 or so, and I'd already started a business and bought a house, and I had a hot rod in the garage and some dirt bikes. And I remember sitting around one day thinking, there's not a whole lot of stuff that I haven't already done that I want to do. You know, I'm kind of young, and I was kind of at a place in life where I felt like I had achieved some of the like main goals that I set for myself. But I really wasn't very happy, and my marriage wasn't going very good at all at that point. I kind of think that if Zach hadn't got injured, that, you know, I might not still be married today. So some of the really bad things in life that happen to us are kind of a catalyst for good things down the road. In hindsight, it was kind of cool getting ready to share with you guys today, because in hindsight, things are more in focus in like 2020. And as I look back, even just this week, reflecting on that time in my life 15 years ago, I learned new things this week, just reflecting. And one thing that always stuck in my head when I think back is I remember I came to the Vineyard the last year of John Wimber pastoring. I feel lucky I got to listen to some of his messages. And then I was here when Carl was pastor, and then I was here when John was pastor again. And I remember when he was telling us he was going to bring Lance to the church. And he was sharing what impressed him about Lance was, most of you probably know that his son passed away. His young son passed away before he became pastor at our church. And John had flown up and gone to his funeral and said that he'd seen Lance stand up at that funeral and put his hands up and worship at that funeral. And that was the thing that really connected with him. And that, for some weird reason, that story stuck in my head was, and then I fast forward, another thing that stuck in my head was Lance talking about one morning, I don't remember what he was preaching about, but he said, you know, when something in your life happens, something big in your life happens, it's too late to work on your spiritual life. You know, you're going to have to be stuck with whatever spiritual life you have at that point and try to deal with the thing that happens to you. And it really stuck in my head that, you know, having a good spiritual life is important, you know, and looking back and reflecting this week on kind of the events that happened and stuff, those two things really stood out to me. So fast forward to Memorial Day 2010. This was the very first day that I agreed to let Zach go to the beach by himself. When I was 15, my mom used to let me go to the beach on the bus. And as we grew up, I was really overprotective of my kids, especially when it came to water, because I have seen personal experience. A lot of bad things can happen in water. You just got to be really careful. So I was really strict about that. And Zach's really good at wearing me down, you know. And so he had talked me into letting him go to the beach that day with his friend without me. And he had also been away all weekend sleeping at his friend's house. And he could just come home, and we were kind of like, you know, you just need a rest for a day. It's Memorial Day, you know, you got school tomorrow. And he was like, you know, I really want to go to the beach. So I'm going to let Zach tell you kind of his version of what happened that day on Memorial Day. As I dropped him off at his friend Travis's house, we were talking about Pastor Jamie 3 years prior had broken his neck at the beach at our church, one of our pastors. He was doing a mom and kids day at the beach, and right when they were leaving, he went to dive in and he hit a sandbar and he broke his neck at the same beach Zach did. So we were talking about that on the way to Travis's house that morning, and we were saying, you know, hey, if you jump in the water, jump with your feet. You know, and I'm not saying this to make it look like it's Zach's fault or anything. I'm just saying this is just weird that those words came out of my mouth, because I didn't know what was going to happen, you know. And I was trying to figure out over the years, you know, why did I have those thoughts that day? And I kind of, this week, I kind of like realized, I think it was so that when that happened to Zach, in his mind, he already knew what happened, you know. And it was like, it wouldn't have been like a moment where he was trying to figure out what was going on. He kind of knew what happened. So
yeah,
I'll let you share you.
Yeah, so from my perspective that day, like my dad said, I was a very persistent kid. If I was told no, I did not like that, and I usually found a way to get my way. So what happened that day was I was gone all weekend with my friend Travis. I've known him since kindergarten, and growing up with him, he was kind of like my brother from another mother. So we were very, very close. And he called me on Memorial Day, which happened to fall on Monday in 2010, so that meant no school. So I was 15 years old, a freshman in high school at that time. And for me, that was great because I was not an academic student growing up, so I loved not having to go to school. And so growing up in Southern California, going to the beach, that was something we do. And he called me and asked if I wanted to go to the beach. And I remember asking my parents if they would drive me down there. And so they said no. And that wasn't the answer I wanted. So I talked to Travis, and he convinced his mom to take us. And all I had to do was convince my parents to drop me off at his house, which I knew I could do. So I got what I wanted, and I convinced my dad to drop me off at Travis's. And it is really interesting because I, to this day, remember that conversation he had with me in the car on the way there about neck injuries and diving. And I was half listening. You know, he was telling me this stuff, but it was kind of just going in one ear, out the other. I was more focused on this day at the beach and hanging out with my friends and meeting up with some cute girls that I didn't tell him that we're going to be there. And so, yeah, it was weird because as 15 years old, you know, you have this invincible mindset. You know, you hear about things happening to other people, like extreme things, but you don't think it's going to happen to you. I sure didn't think this was going to happen, but I hopped out of the car. We pulled up to my friend's house, and I hopped out of the car, and I told my dad I loved him, and I was like, yeah, you know, I heard what you said. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. And crazy enough, that was the last time he saw me walking. And I go down the beach with my friend, and we're hanging out there all day, having a good time. And when you're having a good time, time goes by fast. So before I know it, we get a call from his mom letting us know that she's on her way to come pick us up. So we figured we had about 30 to 40 minutes before she was there, and we all decided to go in the water one last time. And I had known the water was cold that day, so when I stood up to go run into the water, in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to dive into a wave and submerge myself and get used to the cold water as quick as possible. Just kind of rip off the Band-Aid. Diving into a wave is something I've done probably hundreds, if not thousands of times. Growing up here, going to the beach, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I didn't do anything different than I normally did. And I just picked a wave that was coming at me and dove into it head first. And immediately I felt something had shifted, but I didn't know what it was. There was no pain. There wasn't really any signs until I went to go get up and nothing was working. I was still fully conscious, fully aware, awake, and I went to just try to get up out of the water and nothing in my body was working. And instantly my mind went back to that conversation I had with my dad, and I connected the dots pretty quickly that I had broken my neck and paralyzed myself, which was, I don't know how to describe that feeling, but I knew what had happened. And my second thought was, I'm going to die today, because I knew the type of kid I was. I was a jokester, I was a prankster, I was messing around, causing problems. So I figured my friends would think I was just joking with them, floating down the water. And by the time they realized something serious had happened, a few minutes would have gone by and I would have drowned. So
Face down.
yeah, I'm face down in the water. I wasn't able to even turn my head out to take a breath. So all this is going through my mind. I'm accepting I'm going to die today. And I do the two things that I had control over in those moments was just hold my breath for as long as my body would let me. And I said a prayer. I had grown up in church. You know, I went to the Vineyard when I was younger, but God was not a priority in my life. I never chose to go to church. I went because this guy made me go. But looking back, I'm very grateful because it kind of instilled this core value of the importance of my faith and God and going to church, even though back then that was not a priority for me. But I went straight to God, and it's really interesting how in these moments of when you're at your lowest or you need Him the most is when you go to Him. But when life is going good, you know, He's not priority. So in that lowest, scariest moment of my life, I went to Him and
You made a promise.
I prayed. I said, God, if you save me today, I'll go to church every Sunday the rest of my life. And He came through. So I don't know how He made it work, but I think He planted the thought in my friend's head, or my friend had a light bulb moment where he saw my body floating in the water, and he had jumped in right next to me, and he popped up and I didn't. And he ran over to my body and slapped me on my back. And I had no physical reaction to that. There was no movement, and he's standing over my body, and I start floating just back out with the tide. And something in his head connected that something was wrong with me, and he ran over and flipped me over and pulled me out of the water and saved my life. And so that was 15 years ago, this past May 31st.
Which brings me to kind of the main point of what we're talking about today, is that when something bad happens in your life, you know, it might be instantaneous, or it might be something that happens over a period of time. It might be something that happens to you in one day, or it might be something that you're born with that you've been struggling with for a long time. But specifically when something happens quickly and you don't have a lot of time to deal with it, you have a choice how you can respond. For me, I knew right away, like, I couldn't let resentment, I couldn't like blame God for this. I wasn't sure, you know, what life was going to look like. I kind of was like thinking I was going to lose my business. I mean, the bills we're going to get, you know, I think we're over $1 million just from hospital bills, you know. So I didn't really know what to expect, but I had to make a choice. You know, I had to make a choice if I was going to trust God in this moment, and you know, is my faith real? Because when something in your life happens, you know, if it's not real, it's not going to help you. So it was really a light bulb moment in my life, and it's what made my faith stronger, because the promises that God gives us in the Bible, as I've read them all, they're all in my mind, but I start to see them happen in my life now, and I start to see God really step up. doing for me the things that I can't do for myself. He's not doing the things I can do for myself, but he's doing the things that are out of my reach. I think when Zach got to his 8-year injury, he made a post on YouTube. And I'm going to let you just kind of share with that. But you know which one I'm talking about, right? The one about giving things back. So can you just kind of share what you posted on that anniversary date that year?
Yeah, so, man, I've learned so much over these past 15 years with this injury. I think we'll touch more on this later, but just really how hard times make you stronger. And early on in my injury, I got that word persevere tattooed on my body, and I didn't really know like the significance and meaning of it. I saw that word, and for some reason it resonated with me, and it was kind of for me a daily reminder to keep moving forward no matter what, to never give up. So I got it tattooed on my body, and years later, I'm kind of growing in my faith and reading through the Bible, and there was this verse that says suffering produces perseverance. And instantly everything kind of like came together and connected. And I realized, you know what? God allows us to go through hard times because it will make us stronger. And one of the other things that I've learned after my injury is the importance of kind of service to others. I realized that if I was going to move forward with my injury, living in a body that no longer works, that I needed to have a purpose that was bigger than myself. I felt that one of the ways for me to do that was to help other people. And I didn't know how I was going to do that or what that was going to look like, but I just knew whatever my future is going to look like, whatever career I go into, there has to be a part of that where I help and give back to other people. And thankfully now, fast forward 15 years, I've gone to college and I got my master's degree, something that, and I know my dad would contest, there was no way I was going to college prior to my injury. I was an athlete. I was not an academic student. I had the mindset of C's get degrees. As long as I passed my classes, that was good enough for me. I didn't care about getting A's. As long as I passed and moved forward, that was it. I had no plans of going to college. Probably would have worked with my dad for a little bit until I found another job. But my injury actually opened up that door for me. And I was the first person in my family to go to college and surprise myself. I got better grades in college than I ever did in middle school or high school. I really, I kind of realized the box I put myself in, where I actually was holding myself back to living in my full potential, so to speak, and really thrived in college, and then graduated, but still kind of felt like something was missing, and ended up getting a master's degree in counseling, and now I'm doing therapy, which is, I'm a therapist, so it's amazing because I'm doing a job that is fulfilling. I get to help other people, and it's something I can do independently. That was also kind of something I wanted to do, make sure that whatever career I did, it was something I could do independently, and also make enough money to support myself, because living in Orange County in Yorba Linda is not cheap. But it's really interesting how going through something so traumatic and life-changing that God still can work things all together for your good, and really turn tragedy into triumph.
Yes, and the reason I wanted him to share that, the part he didn't share, was that in that video he said, if would I change if I could go back to my injury date, would I change it? Would I not have it happen to me? And he said only if he got to keep the character that he got in the meantime. Yeah. And he just was kind of a spontaneous post that he made, that he wouldn't give up all the character that he had acquired if he had to, he would going back and getting a body that was fully restored wasn't worth the trade, basically. So, which brought me to that promise in Romans 8:28, that God works all things together to good for people that love him. So, big things that are in your life, whether they're instantaneous or whether they're something that's always in your life that you always struggle with, they're like a catalyst for change. They're like fertilizer in your life. All through the Bible, when I was reading the Bible, I always see stuff about struggle, suffering, One of the guys that Zach has followed a lot, and our family has read his books and stuff, is a guy named David Goggins. He's a Navy SEAL, and his whole thing is just about not giving up no matter what, and he's all about physical challenges and just persevering through anything, any kind of a physical challenge, putting himself through marathons and just ridiculous kinds of things, to kind of like strengthen that part of yourself. Another part in Scripture, when I read Scripture that talks about suffering, is in the first 2 chapters of Revelation. There's 7 letters to the churches at the end of the age, and it's a vision that's happening, and Jesus is talking to these churches, and in each section he tells one of these churches, this is what you're not doing right. And then he makes a promise, and each promise, before the promise, it says, to he who overcomes. And I think that's a main message in the Bible that I read, that life has a lot of suffering, life's a struggle, and that God doesn't save us from suffering. His own son suffered on the cross and died for our sins, and God didn't rescue him from suffering. In fact, he suffered horrifically. It's hard for me to even really think about what Jesus went through. Anyways, when I read, I really like that part about being an overcomer, and Jesus talks about, when he's talking to the churches, he's kind of like each church, each of the 7, they each have a moment or a thing that they're doing wrong that they get criticized for, but then the word of encouragement to he who overcomes, and then another promise, you get a new name, or you get whatever the promise is after that, Another thing that really helped us get through, this hard time in our life was community. And it was our friends and family that gathered around us. I can remember the day Zach had his surgery at Chalk Hospital in Orange, that the waiting room on a Wednesday at noon was overflowing with people. Friends that had just come to just sit there with us, took the day off work, just sit there with us. It was an 8-hour surgery. There were so many people in the waiting room that when, someone else was having a surgery and they had like 1 or 2 people waiting, I was having to ask people to step outside in the hallway to make room for other people, because we had so many people that were being supportive. Some of you guys know Danny Roop. And I can remember him texting me a couple days after the injury, and he said, "Come outside, I want to talk to you." And he was like, just kind of like asking me questions about how are you going to transport him around, and how are you going to do this and that? What's your plan? And he's like, "Dude, you are so screwed." He's like, "This is going to follow you around your whole life." And I was like, "Yeah, I probably will." And I was kind of waiting for the encouraging punchline that never came. But he did take out his checkbook, and he gave me a blank check, and he said, you need to transport this guy. So if it's a van, or if it's a lift gate, or whatever it is you need, just buy it and tell me how much it was. I had another friend come and give me a check for $25,000, $26,000. We were having a fundraiser, and we were trying to raise enough money for his next semester in college and some medical bills. And the guy called me, and he was like, "How much is this fundraiser? How much is it? How much are you trying to raise?" And I said, "We're trying to raise $12,500 initially, but really what we have to raise by this date is $26,500. And so he says, "Here's a check," and he wrote me a check for the whole amount. So, I mean, I have, Gary Linhart, someone that went to our church, really dear friend. I can remember Gary and the Deandas brothers coming and helping us with a fundraiser, providing all the food, and Gary and the owner of the Mexican restaurant arguing over who gets to pay the bill. I was supposed to pay the bill. They wouldn't let me pay, and then they were arguing about who gets to pay. So, I mean, it was just like... those kind of things in community, and then people I didn't know who were coming to my house and bringing me food. There was an organization in Yorba Linda, Helping Hearts, which isn't around anymore, but it was just for people in Yorba Linda that had major injuries, and he was a police officer from Bell Gardens, Scott Fairfield, and just looked me up, got us a fundraiser at a golf course, and got us on the radio advertising, and raised enough money for us for some other big bills we had to pay. So watching all this stuff happen around me during all this season really kind of started to make me think about healing, because I'd grown up in the vineyard, although I came to the vineyard kind of late when praying for people and healing and stuff had kind of fizzled out a little bit. And I'd never been very comfortable with it. And I had even at one point after a service asked John Wimber about it because it was kind of bugging me. And he just said, wherever God is, there's always going to be people or other things that are imitating God. So you're going to always have the real thing, and you're going to always have some of the not real thing mixed in with it. So I was able to just kind of like accept some of the things. I came from like a church that was pretty conservative, and the things I saw at the vineyard were a little bit wild, a little bit crazy. So but now all of a sudden Zach's injured, and now I have an interest in healing, and I started to listen to a lot of radio stuff of Randy Clark and Todd White, Old Vineyard, John Wimber stuff, where they just talked about healing, and I was just driving a lot for my job at that time, and I would listen to these things, and then I would go do estimates with people, and I started to like pray for people when I would be doing appointments or when I'd work for people. If I knew I was going to be at someone's house, I would just say a prayer in the morning and say, God, if you have anything for that person, if you have a gift for that person, I'd love to be able to give it to them. I would love to be able to do something nice for them that would mean a lot to them. And I didn't really know what I was asking for. Like, I don't have any kind of faith to like lay my hands on someone and see them get well. But I believe God's real, and I believe that He can work through me. And so I wanted to share just a quick couple stories with you guys that happened during this time, because in reflection on what, Zach's injury, everyone has things that happen in their life that are bad. And there's a lot of people in this room that have way worse story than ours. But just reflecting back on how how things handled, the mindset that we got into of thinking positive and believing that God was going to be there for us and was going to help us, and then seeing all the things happen through people and through God working in our lives that just basically kept me from being completely ruined financially. I mean, I still live in the same house I lived in then, and we've somehow made it from there to today. So I'm going to share with you guys a couple quick stories and then turn you back over to Zach real quick. But we were working in a house. I'm a painter, a house painter, construction, and we were working in a house, and we had 4 people working. There was myself, I'm a Christian, and then Jose is Catholic, and Juan is Hispanic, but he's also a Messianic Jew. And Levi my son was undecided at that point. And so there was a guy we were working for named Dirk, and he was dying of cancer, and he was telling us about it. And so I asked him if we could pray for him, and so all 4 of us got around and prayed for this guy. And I thought it was kind of cool. He had represented like 4 different religions. And so we prayed for him, and about 6 months later he died. And his wife called me about a year later and asked me if I would come back to the house and do some painting because they were going to sell the house. And I said sure. And I was at a paint store. There was a Hallmark store next door, and I was waiting for my paint order to be made. So I walked next door, and I don't like Hallmark, but it was just like after Christmas, all the little Christmas decorations were on sale, and there was a clearance table, and there was one item left, and it was a Christmas decoration. It was a turtle, And I walked past that turtle, and man, my heart just like, something about that turtle kind of spoke to me. And I circled around the store a couple times, and each time I go by the turtle, it was like something weird was going on. I left. I didn't touch that turtle. But I was getting my paint, and it just wouldn't leave my mind. So I went back and I bought the turtle, and I just stuck it in my truck. And about 5 months later, this lady called me and said she had postponed the painting. And she said that, told me about her husband passing away. And I had gotten to this place where a lot of people that I knew at that time were losing people in their lives, were passing away. And I was making these little wooden grief boxes, just as like something to do for someone that was grieving, something you could put pictures in or something. So I was making a grief box for this lady, and the Lord was like, I just had this like thought in my head, put the turtle in there. So I was like, okay. I didn't really know what to think about it, but I just made her the box, and I put a little note in there, what it was and what it was for, and I put the turtle in there. And 3 weeks later, she called me in tears, and she said, Dirk's favorite thing to do was swim with the turtles in Hawaii. And we were just trying to decide if we could afford to go to Hawaii this year. And his 1 year passing, we want to go swim with the turtles, and the money's not really there. So we were trying to debate to pull the trigger or not on this trip. So sending her that turtle was pretty instrumental and amazing. And I could never know how important that turtle was. It didn't mean anything to me, but I did hear it. So, yes. And then most recently, this last week, my mom and I prayed for a lady on the phone. She has a neighbor that's moving, and she's in her early 80s, I think, and she's moving to Arizona to take care of her sister. And so she had bought a place in Arizona and then put her house on the market in Orange. And the market's not good right now for selling houses, and her house wasn't selling. And I was telling my mom, man, I'm really worried about your neighbor, and she can't afford to pay for both houses, and she's worried too. So we said, well, let's call her up and pray for her on the phone. So we did that morning. This was last week. We called her up and prayed for her on the phone together on speakerphone. And we got a text 20 minutes later that her house had sold, and they are asking for a 14-day escrow. Wow. One last thing I wanted to share that I learned during this journey in my life, walking Zach through this injury, was that God's not as rigid as I thought he was originally. There's a word in the Bible that's called co-laboring, which I really like. And I read a book called Co-Laboring with God during this time. And there's some stories in the Bible where you can change God's mind. And the one thing I'm thinking of was when Jesus was turning the miracle he did, turning the water into wine. Like his mom asked him to do it, and he's like, no, it's not my time yet. And then she told the servants, go get those things and fill them up and bring them over here. And then he did it. And then there was another time when God's talking to Moses, and God's angry with Israel, and he says, I'm going to destroy them. And Moses is like, why would you do that? And he says, you brought them all out of Egypt, and you did all this work. Why would you do that? And he says, okay, I won't. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but as I started to pray for people and kind of like let my vineyard heritage kind of come out, I realized that God wants to partner with me on the things that are important to me too. And that if I'm in a house or if I'm around somebody and that person is important to me, God sometimes lets me pick who I want to pray for. And sometimes he answers that prayer. And I'm not really sure why or how or what the formula is, but he's a lot less rigid than I originally thought. And one last example, because I was bringing this up to Jim Fredericks, who I like to read the Bible with, and he didn't like me bringing these two verses up, so he brought up Hezekiah. who asked God, he asked God for 15 more years. No, he asked God to extend his life. He was dying from probably cancer or whatever, and he asked God for more time, and God gave him more time. And in that time, some terrible things happened to Israel. So that's a really weird one, where God answered his prayer, but not good stuff did not come out of it. Where Israel went into captivity and stuff after that because of him, because he ended up showing off all his wealth to a foreign king, and God got upset with him, and all of Israel got punished for it. So Jim had to throw that in there. So I don't know. I mean, anyways, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I was just saying to say, if you guys are going to pray for someone, I mean, it doesn't have to be to heal. It could be for anything, or you could not even know what you're praying for. You could just pray for someone and say, God, give me something to give them, and just see what happens. That's all I've done. So I'm going to let Zach wrap it up with any last thoughts, and then we'll get to those church burgers.
I can smell them. So in the video that was played before we started talking, there's a line in there I say that I want to have a family one day, and I want to have my own home and be independent. When I broke my neck, it felt like my life ended before it even began. And I was also going through something that felt too big to overcome. So I didn't really have much hope for a future. And it was really hard for me because I grew up able-bodied. I knew what it was like to be independent and just not have any physical issues. And then in 1 second, a split-second decision, all of that was taken from me. It was really hard losing that independence. I was a very independent person. My parents would joke with me that I would have had my bags packed by the front door the day of my 18th birthday, ready to get the heck out of here. And so there was a lot of just fear and uncertainty about my future. And when I broke my neck, it really changed my perspective and my outlook on life. I feel like perspective is everything now. There was things that I thought were important that really in the grand scheme of life were minuscule. But one of the biggest things that I've prayed for over the years after my injury is that I wanted to get married one day, and I wanted to have a family, because I felt like that was part of having a purpose bigger than myself, because I could focus on these other people. I know that I'm okay. I've made it out of the hardest part of my life, and I know I'll be good, but I need something more, and I need something bigger than just me and doing things for myself. I've probably prayed more for a wife and having a family than I've prayed for asking God to heal me so I can walk again. And so fast forward 15 years later, I look back on these 15 years and just see all the things that God has done for me in my life. Doors that have opened that I've never would have opened if I wasn't in a chair. And I feel like I've accomplished more in my life right now at the age of 30 than I probably would have accomplished in my entire life had my accident not happened. And kind of like how my dad was saying earlier, if I could go back to that day and change it, but I'd have to lose everything I've gained, it's not worth it. So it's really cool now because I saw this quote that says a lot of times we pray for things that end up coming true, but then we go on to the next thing we want, and we don't really realize we're living that prayer being answered, but we've just moved on from it so fast. We don't really get to appreciate it and be present. So I was just thinking, when I was thinking about what I was going to say here today, I was just thinking about these past 15 years, and the two biggest prayers that I've asked God for have happened. My wife and I will be celebrating our 2-year anniversary in October. Yeah. So that's amazing. And my wife and I just had our first baby together. We had a girl, and she's 2 months old right now. So I'm living independently. I'm doing a job that I get to help other people, that I just get to make enough money to support myself. I have a vehicle with hand controls that allows me to drive. I have a much better relationship with my parents than I did when I was 15 years old. Closer relationship with my siblings. Just life is so much better. This past May was my 15-year anniversary, and it was a little different because it marked 15 years. I was injured when I was 15, so I had been able-bodied for 15 years, and I've been paralyzed for 15 years. So it was kind of a weird anniversary date for me. And this is really interesting because God works in mysterious ways. The weekend of my 15-year anniversary, my daughter was born. So we were in the hospital over the weekend. My daughter was born, and I realized I was in the hospital I was at when I broke my neck. She was born in Hogue, Newport, and that's a hospital I was taken to the day of my injury. That day when my life, I felt like it was over. 15 years later, my wife was giving birth to our daughter together. So talk about, full circle. And I had this thought that came in my head. It was probably God telling me to do something. And I waited till the last day, to the last hour, right before we were going to get discharged, because I didn't want to do it. But I went down to the spinal cord injury unit, a few floors down, and I spoke to the nurses there, just introducing them who I was, telling them I was here 15 years ago in a hospital bed with a broken neck. And now I'm here 15 years later. My wife's above us, and we just had our first child together. So it's, It's really amazing what God can do if you let him. And I can't tell you how much my life has changed for the better when I've decided just to make God my number one priority. And when you do that, he takes care of everything else. So it's been quite a journey, but I love who I've become. And I want to leave with these 3 words that I actually heard when I was in high school after my injury. These 3 words have kind of become a life motto of mine that I've used during hard times just to get me through them. And I don't know, all I remember is my teacher saying this. I obviously wasn't paying attention, but those 3 words for some reason burned into my brain, and I've used them to keep me going these past few years. And the words are improvise, adapt, and overcome.
I like that.
Right on. Thank you guys for having us. And I want to also say one more thing. I wanted to say thank you to Lauren for worship this morning. It's amazing how the songs end up lining up with the message.
Amen. Lauren, you guys want to come back up? We'll sing one more song, but before we sing a song and end, I was just thinking I was happy that Zach shared about his family. And the truth is, God's given him 2 daughters.
Yes.
And that's very special. And if you guys would stand up, so you see his wife and his baby and his other daughter back here. Woo! I know Zach's very, very proud of that. And I thought that when you said in the video about, I want a family, and I looked over and I thought that's so good. And just before we sing this last song, if you, I know there's lots of people with lots of different situations in life. And, when you're caught up in a situation, you can think it's worse than Zach's. You might think, oh, it's not as bad as Zach's. But what I think when I hear Zach's story, what I continually hear, and Adron's story as the father, and even when Zach's mom was telling the story, is that God has never left them without hope. That's right. And I just know some people here without hope. And so if you would just pray, and we'll end with that prayer, and then we'll sing a song. Will you pray for people, just for God to give hope, Zach?
Take it out. All right. Dear God, just want to come to you today. Thank you for this. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak here in front of all these people. I really hope that my story and the things that I've learned resonate with maybe someone here that has been feeling hopeless. I definitely know what that's like, and I know that as long as I have you in my life, then I know everything's going to be okay. So hold on to hope. Maybe give someone here the hope they've been looking for, or a sign that they need just to keep going, just to make it to the next day. I always say this. Thank you for all that you've done, and for all that you're going to do. And thank you for everyone here. Amen.
Amen.